Alright, this video is going to be on setting up your agent scene. I'm going to assume that you've already watched setting up a simple particle scene, and in fact my starting point is going to be that file. So if you remember, this is where we were at there. So now let's see what it looks like with agents. So first we're going to need to add in a construct agent component, and we can see that the construct agent component in fact takes in a particle, and part of this reason is because agents are really just kind of extensions of a particle. They're particles that also have an ability to kind of perceive their environment. So in order to do that perceiving, they have things like a vision radius and a vision angle. I guess I'll go over them when they're relevant and when you can actually see some differences. So here I'm just going to plug my agent settings into here, and you can see that nothing actually changes, right? I mean, I can plug in my particle settings, I can plug in my agent settings, nothing has changed, and that's because agents really are just extensions of particles, and the only things we're doing with them are kind of particle forces, right? These particle rules. We're using bounce contain and then apply custom force. So what's different is that we can now add these kind of agent rules. So let's look at some of them. The most basic is probably this cohesion force. And so plug it in and then I'll explain what it does. So here it takes in an agent Quelea as well as a Quelea network, and with the cohesion force we can see that they all kind of want to travel together. And I'm going to go ahead and remove some of the constraints that we put on the particles, body size. We could keep the, I think the history length could be distracting too. And lifespan is okay. So here we have our agents, and they're being attracted essentially to one another. What the cohesion force says is to steer towards the average position of your neighbor. Actually, when I plugged in this Quelea network, what I was essentially saying was steer towards the average position of every other agent in the scene. Usually this isn't how you want them to behave. So what I have also is this get neighbors and radius component, which is here. And what this will allow you to do is to get the only agents that are within a certain radius of the Quelea. So here we have a vision radius multiplier, which is just going to be the number that this vision radius is multiplied. So the defaults are set to 1. But here when I plug in here, we shouldn't see anything really different. And even if I reset my scene, probably aren't going to see anything too different. Let's try to figure out what the bounds should be. Here, let's say I want my vision radius to be, let's say like this much, 2.4 inches. We'll go with 2. So let's go with a vision radius of 2. And we still don't see anything because they are being emitted from this point, and so they're all being emitted from the same point, so they're all going to see each other, right? So the other thing I'm going to change, I'm going to use a box emitter. Box emitter is what it sounds like. It will emit particles from random positions in a box. So for that we're going to need a box, right? We already have a box. We have this box. Let's just emit them from that same box we're using for our environment. And we need to plug that in there. And now they'll be emitted kind of in a random location in that box. And here we're starting to see how they're cohesing together. Right? Might even be easier to see not as vectors. Right, so they're being emitted, they're only being attracted to the ones that are very close to them, and if you see here, vision radius multiplier, let's say we set that to 0.5, they'll only be attracted to ones that are extremely close. If I set it to 0, they're not going to see anyone, right? As I bring it up, they get kind of, they'll see more and more of their neighbors, right? And I'll avoid going over vision angle multiplier right now because it'll probably be hard to really get what's going on in this scene. So I'm just going to keep adding some agent forces. So this is we're going to set up a simple flocking scene here. So now we have our bounce contain, we have our cohes, and in fact, instead of a bounce contain behavior, let's instead use an agent contain behavior here. So again, we're going to need our agent Quelea, and we need our environment. And now we can keep the bounce contain, which is going to, pretty much, in case they do still end up outside of the box, because again, it's just a steering force. That there's a chance that if their current speed is so high, they may kind of take a loop around. So let's see if we turn off that. So they're still being contained, and they're being cohesed together. The next flocking force is a separation. So if this force says steer towards the average position of your neighbors, this one says pretty much do the opposite, right? So steer away. And so here I'm going to use this same neighbors component, and you should see that they kind of cancel each other out, right? Now it doesn't really seem like they're doing a whole lot. So with the separate force, you actually usually want to use a smaller vision radius multiplier, and a good rule of thumb is it should be about 1/3 of what the cohesion multiplier is. So now if I use this, we'll see that they cohese together, but will also separate if they get too close. And here we'll see that's with it off and with it on. And maybe it's easier if we display the force vector. Apologize for the sounds, just in my studio. So here we can see the separation force acting. You can see it's not being applied in the cases where they're very far away. And here's that cohesion force. Alright. Oh, that's not it. This is it. So the cohesion force is saying the opposite. Right, steer close. Separate force is saying steer away if they get too close. The last one in the common set of flocking behaviors is alignment. So here we have the align force, and the align force pretty much says try to travel, match your velocity essentially. Travel in the same direction as your neighbors. This is pretty much another just kind of collision avoidance behavior, just like separate. By aligning your velocity, you have less of a chance of colliding, right? Here, usually the good rule of thumb for this one is to be about 2/3 of the cohesion radius multiplier. Plug that one, and so let's plug that in here, and we'll see that they now all travel in generally the same direction. And I think we kind of get the point here. So let's look at alignment. We can see the alignment is pretty much telling them to match their velocities, right? And here it might be useful to see the actual direction of the agents in the scene. So here now we can see with that align on, right, they match their velocity. It's pretty obvious. A lot of times I find the alignment to be weighted too highly, and so I'll tone it down a little bit by using the weight multiplier. So they don't align as strongly. can see the difference between that and what I had. Yeah, a little less alignment going on, right? So now that we have this, let's crank it up to see if we can kind of break down the system by overloading it with too many. Alright, so as we increase the number of agents in the scene, let's see how many we got. We should start to see these numbers creep up. So in order to calculate the neighbors in a given radius, you have to look around and potentially look at every other agent in the scene, although there are optimizations to get around that. But we can see that it's getting pretty high here, and each one of these is really high. And I'm actually going to turn off continuous flow so that we don't completely overload my computer. And I'm going to show you one last optimization that you're going to have to make, which is to take the output of one of these and feed it into the next. And it should be clear that if I have all of the agents that are within my vision radius, that if I'm looking for all of them that are in 1/3 of my vision radius, that I could just search through the ones I've already found. And so if you look, we should see these numbers go down as we're searching through a smaller amount of agents in the scene, just like there. And clearly, there's just too many. So I'm going to reset it, bring it down. Let's go 300. Yeah, let's start lower. Oh, right. Set continuous flow off. Alright, so there we go. In fact, you know what, a better thing to do is let's set the lifespans to be infinite, and let's set the number of Quelea. Let's hard code that number. How about that? Let's start with 150 and see how it does. Pretty good. But let's see how it does if we use the original Quelea network here and here. And now, hopefully, this number gets better as we plug those components in. I'm going to set my vision radius looking much lower. Three to 4 milliseconds each. And this one goes down pretty significantly. This one doesn't change as much because what this outputs is done as a list, and so they're still going to have to go through each one that's in there. So, and in the case where there's a lot of them stuck together already, you don't get much of a benefit, right? So we can keep going. We have enough knowledge, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to add in view force, which is an extra. I'm also going to get rid of. Where's my apply custom force? You guys see it? Apply custom force. And let's reset. So that was the kind of gravitational force downwards. And now let's look at what the view force does. So again, it takes in our Quelea, and here it takes in a Quelea network. However, if we were to use one of these, we're going to see that they kind of act really crazy. That the purpose of this force is for them to steer laterally if there's someone in front of them. That's blocking their view, essentially, right? But if we have our vision radius multiplier set to be 1, and we have our vision radius set to vision angle multiplier and vision angle set to 360, then they're going to be saying that everyone is in their field of view, even if they're behind them, which is clearly not right. So instead, let's use, we can use this, but our vision angle multiplier, so if 360 is 1, then 1.5 would be 180, and 90 would be 0.25, but I'm going to go with 45 degrees, which would be 0.125 of 360, or 1/8. And I'm going to use that as my view. So now, you'll see that it's only applied sometimes, and it's only applied in instances when there's someone blocking his view. We turn it off. See, they don't behave as crazily. Here you can kind of see that they steer to make their view clear, and it's obvious. This isn't the best demo to show that, but hopefully you get the idea. You can kind of see them fighting for a viewing space there, right? That's all I had to say about that. There are plenty of other agent rules that you can look into. Oh, I didn't talk about max speed and max force. Let's go over that. Alright, so agents have this ability to steer, right? They have a kind of a direction that they're heading, that they actually have to turn their bodies in order to head a different direction, unlike a particle who can just kind of move wherever it wants all the time. Agents would have to steer, and so the steering ability is affected by these two parameters. The first one being the maximum speed. So the maximum speed is essentially how far it is allowed to move in a single time step. So if this was extremely high, you might see them, let's see if we can, so what's it at? Is that 0.5? Let's do something really high, 0.25. You'll see that they travel extremely fast. It's the point where they almost look like they're teleporting, and if this was really high, and I reset the scene, you can see they move a lot faster. Clearly, right? So usually this isn't a good number, but maybe 1 is appropriate. And their maximum force determines their steering ability, so how well they can kind of turn. So here, if the max force is 1, let's look at, say, what our cohes force. Let's look at the length of it. You're 0.1, right? So the force that's actually applied to the agent is going to be limited to this maximum force. Let's see, for the cohesion force, they're pretty much always told to travel at maximum speed towards the center of their neighbors. So if I start by bringing it up, let's see if we get any noticeable difference. Hopefully you can see that they're kind of turning their bodies extremely rapidly. They're at the point where they kind of look in one way at one instance and then look in the complete opposite way in another. So this should usually be set pretty low, and you'll see that this should hopefully affect how well their ability to react to those forces, how much they can turn in a single time step. So you can see their movements are a lot smoother and they take a lot longer to turn around. So max speed, how fast they can move in a single time step, or how far they can move in a single time step, and then max force is going to be how well they can steer. And higher values mean they can steer, they could turn very quickly, and lower values means they have to take a lot longer to make any turn. So I think I got everything, and I'll see you in the next one.